Hi, and welcome back to the channel. You found me on the coffee break. Okay, so what we're going to talk to you today about, it's a very quick lesson about dividends. Seeing as we want to build a dividend income factory, then you need to know what to look for in dividends. And I'm going to tell you today. Please note, this is not financial advice, but it is financial education. Okay, so if we have a look here, when you have a look at the website, what is it called? Okay, so the website is Seeking Alpha. I had to go back and have a look. So Seeking Alpha, it's a great website. You can use it free, or obviously I'm not a paid sponsor for that, but yeah, it's just a site that I find is very good for looking at dividends. It gives you even the earnings and everything. It gives you actually a good readout, even in the free version. So what you look at is you've got a dividend scorecard, and then the dividend growth, it gives you dividend yield, but you can pick up everything from there. So in other words, okay, so let me give you some examples. Okay, so if you look here, you've got a dividend yield of 5%. Okay, got a dividend growth of 5%. That's over the last 5 years. It's grown its dividend over 50 years, and the payout ratio is 35%. Okay, so now, what do you guys think about that? Okay, so, oh, sorry, Red. No, this is my channel, not your channel. Okay, so what do you guys think about that? Well, I think that's fantastic. 5% yield with 5-year growth of 5%. So in other words, every year it grows with 5%, and the yield is quite good to start with at 5%. So that will increase by 5% every year. Okay, so then the payout ratio is 35%, which is on the low side. You really want it under 50, but if it's over 50, it's usually not too bad, depending, but then you look at other factors as well. And there's 50 years of dividend growth. So this company's been growing its dividend for 50 years. So when it's been growing the dividend so long like that, they don't want to stop the dividend growth. They want to try and keep the growth up. Obviously, they need the earnings and the cash flow to do that. But that's you can actually see from the payout ratio that they're not under pressure at all. And okay, so if you look at our next one, oh sorry, Red. Okay, so the next one is a dividend yield of 12%. Now, some people fall into this trap. They go for high dividend yield. They think, the higher the dividend yield, the better. But sometimes there's a reason why it's so high. One of the reasons being if the share price has fallen. Your dividend growth, it's minus 10. So and then years of dividend growth is 0. And your payout ratio is 99%. Okay, so now that one is not one that you would really want to look at, because these are all hypothetical figures, by the way. I could give you real companies' figures, but this is just to learn. So 12% high dividend yield, but there's it's 0 years of dividend growth, and in fact the dividend has been cut. So you have a dividend cut, and they're at 99%. So in other words, they haven't got any room to grow the dividend. Sometimes what happens is a company's earnings are under pressure, and they're paying out a dividend, and they want to keep maintaining the dividend. If you pay increased dividend for 25 years, you become a dividend king. I mean, a dividend aristocrat. 50 years as a dividend king. So they want to try and keep up the dividend, even though they actually getting into debt and getting they're not able to afford the dividend. So yeah, that does happen sometimes. So the second company that I gave you, I would not be interested in that. You could also look at the share price, and you've probably seen that the share price has been falling for the last year. It's down for the last year. It's down for the last 5 years. So yeah, you can look at that as well. Look at the different periods, and then you can see the share's been on a decline, and obviously, yeah. So don't fall for the dividend trap. If a company's got a high yield, look at all these factors. If it's got a high yield and it's sustainable, um, because usually, you see, what most companies do is they want to retain some of the earnings, so to grow the company. So they pay out a percentage of their, like, say, let's say 30% or whatever. They pay 30% of the earnings, and the other 2/3, or well, 70% if you get the maths right. The other 70% would be reinvested into the business to grow the business. Okay, so that would maybe not be something that I would look at. Okay, then I've got the next one. The next one is a 2% dividend yield with a growth rate of 30%. So over 5 years, the dividend yield's gone up 30%. Also, on Seeking Alpha, you can actually see if the dividend's gone up over 1 year, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. It will give you. And if you go to the dividend, so you've got the dividend scorecard, which gives you the last dividend paid. It gives you a lot of information there, the payout ratio and stuff like I'm telling you. And then if you go to the next section, is dividend yield, and then the next section gives you the historic, and they actually show you the last how many years of dividends that they've paid, and yearly, and then you can see that they've upped the dividend. In other words, in, let's say, 2015, they paid a 5 cents dividend, and now in 2025, they're paying a $10 dividend. So you can see the dividend's gone up. Okay, now this one, what I'm showing you now, has only got 1 year of dividend growth. Okay, so it doesn't have a 5-year figure. And if you look at the historic, like I said, when you look at the historic, they've only paid 2 dividends. They paid one in last year and one the year before. So in other words, they've just started to pay a dividend. Even some of the tech companies like Meta and that, they've started paying dividends now. So obviously they'll pay a small dividend and they'll rather increase it over time. But the nice thing about this is you see that the dividend, the payout ratio is 6%. So in other words, they paid a small dividend, they've grown it by 30%, over 1 year, say, for example. And you do get companies like this. I've actually found one that I will be adding. So it's got a very low payout ratio, so there's a lot of room to increase the dividend. They've just started paying the dividend, they've increased it, so they can increase that dividend year after year after year and still be on a low payout ratio. So they've got room to grow that dividend over time. So for me, that looks like a very worthwhile. But obviously, like with anything, you've got to be patient. You buy, and then you see the dividend growing every year, and it should be exponential. The other thing about what I wanted to mention, especially with the 12% figure that I gave you, when the price goes down, the yield goes up. So in other words, if your price goes down, your dividend yield goes up. Now this actually helps to sort of make the dividend companies less volatile when the market crashes. When the market crashes, your growth shares with high PEs and stuff, they do grow quickly, but sometimes you might find that price drops, and for example, the price might go down 20, 30, 40% or whatever. But the dividend payers, because of the dividend yield, let's say the dividend yield's 4%. If the price falls a bit, that dividend yield will go up to 5%. So it becomes more attractive to buy at that lower prices for someone who doesn't own the shares. So in other words, or people who own it, if the price falls, then they get a higher yield on cost on the shares. So that's why when the price goes down, the yield goes up. But that's why sometimes you can see a high yielding share and you think, oh, okay, this is great. It's paying a great high yield dividend. It's great. That's awesome. But sometimes if, especially if the price has fallen, there's a reason for that. The profits are reducing, the earnings are reducing, and the dividend could get cut. So always be wary about that. It's called a dividend trap. So always be wary about that. Don't just look at just the dividend yield. Look further. Look deeper. Look. Try and get as much information as you can. Like I say, Seeking Alpha has a lot of information that you can get, and yeah, like I say, I'm not promoting it, but I've just used it, and I see that it's fantastic for doing that. So just I use it. Okay, so like I say, not financial advice, but it is financial education. And yeah, so there's your dividend shares. So yeah, you can slowly build up your dividend shares. Try and buy every month, whatever, if you can, and see your dividend, and then reinvest your dividends and watch your dividend income grow. And that is how you get an income factory. Obviously, you've got other things like, for example, you've got uh, like bonds and stuff as well. Okay, but obviously sometimes your bonds can be also in a tax-free account, yeah, which is also good. Okay, all right, wonderful.